Welcome to the Solex podcast, where we discuss changing the way people approach their health. Everything at its most fundamental level is energy and frequency, and we are proud to be at the forefront of this field, even though we are just scratching the surface.
You know, today's topic, Jake, is very interesting to me. Not that the information in and of itself is going to be fascinating to many degrees, I think. The general topic might be, as soon as I say it, people are going to go like, wait, what? I already know everything about this. Yeah. But what we will dive into will make great connections to the AO scanner. And it's not everything actually has an influence that you take physically will have a direct influence on how your learning and education about your frequency state can be displayed and can be reacted to. And today, I think we're going to dive into many aspects of a topic that actually have strong influence on how you can learn through the scanner to improve how your body is functioning, your health and well-being. Again, of course, the AO scan technology is a learning tool. And one of the things it's going to learn, the best thing it can do is if it can give us proper information about the state of our body, one of the things we can do is actually provide the state in which frequencies can be best informed as to...
And to use a scanner to optimized?
And to optimize, yeah. In that process of informing our bodies and then optimizing our bodies where we want it to be, right? And so we take the grand topic, right, of H2O. Yep. We're talking about water, right? And like I said, most people are going to hear that and they're going to be like, oh, great, Kai, water. Everybody knows about water. This is the most boring topic. But actually, what we're going to find is it's not boring at all. No. In fact, we're going to find that there is some incredible, unusual power in water on many different levels. Of course, you know, the majority of the Earth's surface is made up of water, right?
Yeah.
And the majority of your body is made up of water.
More so than I had originally thought.
Right?
What that number, the 60, 70% that you learn in school?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, maybe that's not quite all that it seems.
Yeah,
like.
It is. Yeah, when we even jump into that, let's throw this out and make sure we're all on the same page, right? Yeah, if we said that 60 to 70% of the body is made up of water, I've also heard the number of like 98, 99%.
Yeah.
Right? Well, both those numbers can be accurate. And how are they accurate, Kai? Well, by volume, 60 to 70% is accurate. By molecular count, 98, 99% is accurate. So both can be accurate, and they are accurate. It's fascinating because that also tells us how small the H2O structure is. And we're going to talk about some other structures around H2O. But you've done some research. You've been spending the last several weeks going through some studies and some books and some masters around the subject of water. I've been diving into some clinical work and studies that have been done around that as well. And I think we both have found some fascinating things that are worth sharing, especially to this audience who is so attuned to seeking out their health and well-being. And everybody wants good health. I don't think you can ask anybody off the street and say, hey, do you want to feel good? Yeah, everybody wants to feel good. But this particular crowd is very interested in doing something about it, in learning and taking some action. And thus the AO scan technology fits squarely within that as providing a massive amount of information. And actually water can influence and help in that process of healing and getting improvement, performance within the body.
Yeah, I asked Lauren the other day, and I was secretly filming him on my phone.
Oh,
I just had my phone at my chest.
Not disclosed. We won't tell him that.
Yeah, he probably won't watch this, will he?
Yeah.
And I just asked him, how is hydration important to the scanner? And I think I tried to phrase the question as, how can it optimize your experience with the scanner?
Oh, good.
Looking at your frequencies, and then giving you education on how you can improve those frequencies and that frequency state. And I think we'll get into that a little later when we talk about water intake. But it was fascinating. And he said that you will get the best and most consistent scans you've ever had by just being properly hydrated before scanning and optimizing. And I love that. And I hope that we can get more into that.
And I think that with that, I'd add consistently properly hydrated, right? The ups and downs of our hydration, we don't necessarily want. We want to try and maintain consistency. And that in and of itself can actually do wonders within how you feel. Even areas of the body that you don't even think would have an impact because of water, it actually does, right? You had a stat around dehydration.
Yep. Would you believe that just a 2% decrease in hydration levels, and in this instance, this is the reduction of intake of water per day. So not like dehydration of tissues on a cellular level, but the intake of what, someone at your body weight, your activity levels should be receiving per day. Just a 2% decrease in that can impact your blood vessels the same way smoking a cigarette does.
Wow.
And it's just not, that was fascinating.
That is.
But also a 2% decrease in hydration levels also leads to measurable cognitive loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about cognitive loss, that was thrown around everywhere. And to someone like me, okay, what does that mean? What does measurable cognitive loss mean? And just briefly, your sensory capacities begin to diminish. Life is a little less colorful. It affects immediate memory skills. So think of the last time you met someone new and they told you their name, and then you forgot about it 10 seconds later.
Yes, it's happened.
Maybe that's just a typical reaction, or maybe you got to think, oh, was I properly hydrated? I don't know, right?
I've heard, it's interesting along those lines. I once heard this saying, and this isn't in any of these studies, but like when we take, sometimes when we take a nutrient, right? We'll take a supplement or even a food that's good for us. That if we have to take it, consume it with water, that water will actually do more good for us than what we're taking the supplement for. I mean, the water will have a greater impact on our well-being. I think it's probably obvious. If you're in a more acute situation of inconsistent hydration, you're going to run into more problems. And you're going to have a greater experience when you are properly hydrated, right? In addition to just running to the bathroom more often. I mean, you have that experience in the beginning.
Yes.
I think most of us have gone through that process. But that's fascinating. I think of the smoking side of things, and it does make sense because we'll get into like a topic of how a certain byproduct of dehydration actually creates a reactive oxygen species, which is it's oxidization within your body, which is going to cause more havoc and more problems, more disease. It's associated with all those things. That makes total sense to me when I connect it to that research that's there.
Yeah, it's truly mind-boggling all that hydration affects, whether you're dehydrated or overhydrated. Kind of like what you were saying earlier, is like we want to be right in that sweet spot consistently. And of course, proper hydration, kind of going back to the 2% decrease, right? Mm-hmm. If we're looking at on a big scale, proper hydration has been found to be the single most important thing you can do to treat chronic illness. And so in some of my reading, doctors will actually, before they do any kind of treatment, they will say, are you properly hydrated? That's the first step. That's the first line of defense.
So that actually is a fascinating thing. If anybody's going through and working with somebody who maybe is having inconsistent scans, right, with their AO scan technology, that's always a great question. Are you consistently hydrated? Not did you hydrate today, but are you regularly taking in enough? And then we'll talk about what enough is as well. Not that you don't know. There's a million resources out there, it seems like, on what is correct. I mean, I've heard from half your body weight to a certain regimen of water, and all of which I think have the right and probably successful impact on the body, because barring overhydrating, right?
Mhm.
And we could talk about some of the dangers of actually just getting too much just straight H2O, and without the associated minerals involved, you can actually get into a flushing situation, and that can cause some challenges. But what we do find, and what we have found, and I think you found this as well with the different researchers and studies we went through, is that even the researchers who have chosen in part of their life study to study water of all things, basically say there's more we don't know about water than what we do know about water, and especially when it comes to how it works within the body. That's fascinating to me, given the readily available amount of water and the consumption of water. It's fascinating to me. In fact, I came across of somebody who did study water as a part of his career. This is a Nobel laureate, Albert Szent-Györgyi. He said that discovery consists of seeing what everybody else has seen and thinking what nobody else has thought. So you can take the most obvious topic. Everybody sees it. Everybody sees H2O, Jake. Everybody sees water. Everybody thinks they know everything about water, knows enough about water. And then all of a sudden, we learn about a new discovery or 2 or 10 because somebody has chosen to think a new way about it, even in something so prevalent as water, right? Fascinating.
That's beautiful. When I first started diving into hydration, I thought, okay, this is cool to learn. Because one, we're preparing for a podcast and we want to provide the best content possible. And anyone who wants to be challenged by a subject, hydration will challenge you. But I think when I thought of its personal importance to me, and why I think this is relevant to the discussion is I think applying new concepts and new things, learning in my life, helps me to be mindful of that subject in my life. So I thought with hydration and these things that I'm learning, applying the concepts, and not only am I potentially doing my body some good by hydrating more optimally.
Yeah.
You'd hope, right?
Yeah.
I did drink a lot of water before. I ate some hydrating foods today.
I was going to ask you, in studying this, did you notice, have you consumed more water?
Oh, yes.
During the same period.
Same.
Same.
Yeah, and consumed more. I don't know. I maybe pushed back on the more water, but maybe I'd consumed water properly.
Oh, very
more
good.
properly.
Yeah.
Probably it came with some more water because I was looking at some of my water intake some days and wow, it wasn't even close. I can't believe I was much further than that 2% decrease. I thought. But as far as the mindfulness thing goes, and I don't mean to stray off the topic, but it might be a good backdrop for the rest of this episode is drinking that water, adding salt to it, drinking in the morning, right? Eating foods that hydrate, and all of that, and drinking in the right times of day. Mm-hmm. That sort of mindfulness just, it improved my life, and I started to do other things as well to optimize that hydration. It is kind of a cycle, right?
If you happen to be listening, thank you, first of all. But great time to grab a glass of water.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Regardless of the day. We'll even talk about times of day and circadian rhythms and how that impacts the water that you take. Let's baseline, right?
Okay.
H2O, the molecular structure of what we know to be water. It also comes in its different stages or states. We know water in its solid form. We know water in obviously the liquid form. We're aware of water in its gas form. And we're going to spend actually some time in that fourth phase, which is, again, science and science research. Although this is decades and decades old and in the making, this fourth phase of water is powerful, although contested still, and has it has its own set of doubts to it. But there is enough evidence out there that there is a state of water that acts like gas, kind of acts like solid, but then has some properties of liquid, and so it's in between all of these. and it's often been described as a gel-like substance. But that's, I think, where a lot of the powerhouse resides that we're going to find in the discovery process of looking at something so familiar. We're going to tease out a few things that say, okay, why is it when, if I have been dehydrated, and let's talk about that really quick. Mm-hmm. Dehydration and hydration comes in two ways. One is you could look at your percentage, like you said in the very beginning, a 2% reduction in consumption is like smoking a cigarette, right? Mm-hmm.
Same impact on your blood vessels and the way
same impact.
Endothelium constricts and dilates,
Correct. Good. But then there's the other part of hydration, and probably the more valuable part to some degree is that we're talking about the saturation of the tissue, the tissues throughout the whole body. I think that is critical to understand that we're not just looking at consumption, but what does consumption lead to? When we talk about mindfulness, we're talking about consuming the water in such a way so that the body's tissues can optimally have the resource to do what they need to do. And we'll talk about energy as well.
Medical Daily had a report, and it showed that 75% of Americans are dehydrated. Oof. But either, at rest but especially at inactivity, sweating. We're sweating out.
Okay.
All of our, I watched, or I kind of followed a doctor and a researcher, and he talked about athletes and how can an athlete drop dead from a heart condition or, some kind of chronic pain or chronic illness, and how do they drop dead?
Yeah.
Aren't they the most, healthy, strong individuals?
Right.
And he talked about sweating and the importance of replenishing the sodium, potassium, all the electrolytes back into your body. He talked a lot about selenium too, and a lot of minerals. So I talked about the 2% decrease, right?
Yep.
And that also, I think, applies to preventing against the chronic illnesses. So we go cancer. We go atherosclerosis. Mm-hmm. We go diabetes. And we talked about this last episode, the last episode of the 4 horsemen of death. We talk, let's see, it supports full cognitive abilities, the endothelial health, and improving vitality and longevity when you hydrate properly.
So 75%
of Americans in this report are dehydrated.
But we all drink plenty of soda. It has water in it. Americans drink plenty of coffee. Yeah. Has water in it. Right?
Yeah.
Aren't we getting enough water?
Well, there is water in those substances, those drinks. What I see with those drinks is the caffeine, and that was what helped me understand. It's almost like it cancels out the water a little bit because it's a diuretic.
Yeah, right.
So it signals the kidneys to flush. And so, I drink coffee a lot.
Yeah.
And I had to, that was kind of that mindfulness thing. It's like, you have to offset that. You have to drink water. And that goes back to being mindful. If you're drinking soda, if you're drinking coffee or caffeinated beverages, you want to just make sure that you're supplementing your body with proper hydration.
And did you come across anything that would recommend, like if you did consume, let's say 8 ounces of coffee or a caffeinated soda, as far as hydration goes, you've now caused obviously the opposite effect for the body to flush and get rid of a hydration level or reduce it. What would you do?
So what I saw and what helped me was and typically I drink coffee in the morning, right? I guess soda's not typically tied to the morning. But I would try, I heard, from 8 ounces to 16 ounces per cup, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, that's so much drinking. I'm going to pee so much.
Yeah.
Tried to, another big thing, part of that was adding electrolytes, a little bit extra electrolytes. So I'd put some, and this is something that many doctors talk about, right? First thing in the morning, you get that, give or take 16 ounces of water.
Right.
Add some like sea salt or some Himalayan
salt,
pink salt. And then some even say squeeze a lemon.
Yes.
Jennifer Nelson Hawks is a lot. She appears a lot on this Solex content, YouTube. She's been on a couple of podcasts, and she frequently talks about the importance of squeezing a lemon.
Yeah.
And how that just, when you drink that water, to offset the caffeine or the diuretic, to just saturate the tissues.
Yeah.
Right, especially to when you're flushing out so much.
So critical first thing in the morning, right?
Yep.
And throughout the day. But I remember reading about Tim Ferriss, who's not a researcher. Well, I guess he is a researcher in his own way.
Yeah.
He is his own experiment by far. 4-hour body. He talks about an optimal refresh or restore in the morning that he, through his own measurements, was, I believe it was 750 mLs in the morning with a pinch of salt, Himalayan salt, and then and lemon as well, as I recall. And I did that for a long time, and it's a great boost. In fact, since doing this research, I go to bed at night with a full glass of water on my nightstand, ready for the morning.
So you can wake up.
Ready for the morning. In the morning, and the first thing I do, I grab it off, take it, and I drink the whole thing down. Huberman Lab, Andrew Huberman, he did some research, presented some information. He talked about the pace at which you should drink, or he brought some interesting information forward, where the first 10 hours of the day you should have 8 ounces an hour.
Yep. On average.
On average, right? He said, you don't have to be militant about this. This is not like,
the
hour's done, 8 ounces, let's go.
Yep.
You can average it out, but kind of pace yourself through the 10 hours, which I thought was interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, most healthy adults.
Yeah.
I guess there's probably extremes if you're like a really
tiny person,
and if you're a really big person. And
you can adjust to that.
And then I immediately thought, okay, is that the same when you're in activity, when you're exercising?
Oh, yes.
That number changes a little bit, and with a conversation with Andy Galpin, not my conversation with this guy, the PhD professor of kinesiology.
Kinesiology.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
practiced that word before this podcast because I thought I'd say it. But he talks about dividing your weight by 30. And that in ounces is how much you should be drinking every 15 minutes. Kai, when I first tried that, I forgot about the divide 30 part, and I started trying to drink 30 ounces every 15 minutes.
Yeah, now you're gonna flush.
Well, I bought this, and I didn't have my water to know, so I went and bought a water bottle from the gym that I was at, and it was it was probably this tall, I guess, 30 ounces. It was 30 ounces. Like, I got to drink one of these every 15 minutes. And so I started trying, and I got halfway through. I'm like, I can't do it. I'm going to be dehydrated today. Darn it. But then luckily it's the divide by 30.
Divide by 30.
Yep. And
that's a specific name. Get the
Galpin equation, I think.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know who coined that term. I know that Andrew Huberman, he said, let's call it the Galpin equation. So maybe that's for the next history of this equation, it's going to be the Galpin equation. And I guess since we're on exercise, Dr. Galpin, when you become dehydrated in exercise, and this made me think back on some of those days at the gym where I'm going to be like, I'm going to max out today on bench press, or I'm going to power clean X amount of pounds. I get to the gym, I feel okay, feel normal, and I cannot get the weight up. And I wonder, because is this a mental thing? Am I not getting over the mental hurdle of moving this weight?
Just a lot of weight, yeah.
And that was typically my dad's answer. And I wonder if my dad has been dehydrated for years too. Maybe I got to talk to him. But what he says is, when we become dehydrated during exercise, which can happen so fast, we can be properly hydrated before and then start sweating. Yeah. And we can already almost reach that 2% decrease. Yeah. And just think of that effect on your blood vessels, your cognitive abilities during exercise, which you do not want your blood vessels not working, constricting and dilating during exercise. Anyway, he talked about how there's a significant increase in perception of difficulty in exercise. So maybe that does kind of go back to the brain muscle, the neuromuscular connection there. Yeah. And I thought, with it being so easy to get to that 2% decrease, if you're not careful, how much gains are being left behind.
Yeah.
If you're looking for those gains, right?
Well, and you don't just have to be an athlete, right? I
Yeah,
mean, athlete,
totally.
obviously, it's so
Yes.
evident. Let's say it's a hot day, but you're a thinker, right? You're going to go into an important meeting. You want to make sure that you are properly hydrated, because
Yes.
one of the things, like in the first 10 hours of the day after you wake up, drinking 8 ounces a day, according to Huberman, one of the keys that he points out is that it's the circadian rhythm of cells that actually have to do more work during those 10 hours of alertness. Part of that is your brain. And part of what we do know is that proper hydration actually delivered to the cells, right? And let's get into this a little bit deeper. But getting into the cells actually allows, obviously, the cells to function at a more at an improved level, or at an optimal level. What does that mean? That means one of the functions of those cells within the brain is an actual, what's called an awareness. There is a greater alertness that takes place when you're properly hydrated according to your cognitive function. Well, the last thing you want to do is go into an important meeting and then be dehydrated. Your alertness is weakened, and thus your ability to flow through the information is harmed, right? So sitting here, totally hydrated. Hopefully I was out in the hot weather outside, but drinking water along the way just to make sure that I try to avoid losing what I've kept and am trying to keep, right?
Yep, and that's really the first line of defense there is hydration. And speaking of cells, it is absolutely crucial to every cell function.
Yep.
Clearly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're 99% water, water's got to be important to our cells.
Right.
It's that irrigation system delivering nutrients, oxygen in and out of cells. You spoke about being outside, temperature regulation of your body.
Yep.
Maybe this kind of goes back to some cellular stuff, but it rids of waste products.
Yeah.
It's anti-inflammatory.
Yes, it has those properties in it as well, for sure.
It's almost a lubricant for your joints. So
Yep.
if you're having, a lot of chronic joint pain, maybe water's one of the first things that you explore.
Yes.
And I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying what you should do or not do.
Yeah.
But what I see here a lot is that's the first thing. Make sure you're properly hydrated. And then all of the chemical and metabolic reactions. It's a breakdown of what we eat into the form of proteins, lipids, carbs, and it essentially, from food to energy to elimination.
Yes. I love this, because this is where we now start to, let's pull back a couple layers of the onion on water and look at it a little bit more strategically within the actual body's use of water. And why? Why does the body need so much water? Of course, we understand that you consume water, it goes into the bloodstream, and then goes to the cells. Water could also act as a carrier. It helps with diffusion, taking lipids, briefly bonding with them, and then allowing them to be carried into and diffused past the cell membrane into the cell, so the cell has more resource. We could talk about the aquaporing channels and things like that down the road, but what I want to get into is, let's get this macro view of that. Why is water so important? And let me make an argument here based off of several different studies. Hydrophilic bodies versus hydrophobic bodies. Hydrophilic are bodies, not just the whole body, but any surface that likes water, right? Hydrophobic.
I love Dr. Pollack saying, water-loving substance or
Yes.
material.
Yes.
I always said water-loving.
That's
I love that.
That's a great
Yep.
way to think it. And there are a lot of water-loving substances, right? And clearly the body is a water-loving substance, whether it's, let's just go all the way down to the cellular level. Even the fascia that wraps the organs and the muscles, water-loving. Well, what happens, and this is where we get into some of the key function as to why we don't feel really, really good when we're dehydrated, and why we feel great and perform better when we are hydrated. When we look at that, we start with, okay, what happens when H2O is introduced to a water-loving surface.
Okay.
Okay, blood vessels, cells, let's just anything, any tissue. What happens is normally H2O is neutrally charged. The two hydrogens and the one oxygen actually have an offsetting charge combined. Get into protons and electrons. That's the basis, right? When we talk about water, the protons, electrons are the elementary units of what we're talking about, and they play central roles in water. What happens though? Well, when H2O, this neutral state, actually spawns a negative charge. We don't know every reason. Again, there's not, the researchers can't tell you every concrete reason why this happens, but it does happen, and it happens consistently. A negative charge is spawned against the H2O. And this actually requires some sort of change to the structure of the H2O itself. What happens is that spawning is the formation of what an Australian named John Watterson termed. He called the exclusion zone. And what are we excluding? Well, we're excluding everything but the structure itself of hydrogens and oxygens. It was Sir William Hardy that termed the phrase the fourth phase of water, which is what we're going to talk about right now. And that is this area around any hydrophilic surface. So what happens? Water on a surface. Let's just call it a blood vessel interior wall. H2O is present. You get a negative charge added. It picks up a negative charge in that molecular structure, and then it starts to create this honeycomb structure, a plane of honeycomb structures as more negative charges are added, which then actually cause the structure to be imbalanced as it builds. What you end up with is because it's this honeycomb structure, you end up with an extra hydrogen atom. Well, that hydrogen atom actually gets pruned. It gets cleaved from the structure. It is positively charged, and it goes away next to this exclusion zone. And so you get this barrier around H2O that is actually developing an H3O2 structure. And it is cast off in its exclusive, any solvents, anything that shouldn't be related to this gets pushed away. The H3O2 structure, this exclusion zone, actually becomes very organized and structured. And again, apply this anywhere within the cell, not just the cell, but within the cell, again, around
anywhere
the mitochondria.
That's hydrophilic.
Anywhere that's
Anywhere.
hydrophilic. You're getting this organization. Well, molecular activity is commonly in science defined as being random. Yet in this exclusion zone, test over test over test over test shows a consistent structure being held. And why? So it's being held, and that in and of itself is fascinating because that holding holds what kind of charge? And this is where actually we become very powerful, where water becomes very powerful. The EZ, as it's termed, exclusion zone, EZ, is commonly negatively charged. Next to the EZ, you have the rest of the H2O structure, where H2Os have been cast off and been picked up and they're neutrally charged, or actually what happens closer to the EZ, you have a positive charge. So you have this negative post of EZ, and right next to it, you have a positive. Does that sound familiar?
An immediate image comes to mind.
Yeah.
Of a battery. Am I on the right track?
That's exactly right, though. Go open the hood in your car, and you look at your battery, and you have two posts. One's a negative charge, one's a positive charge. They both must exist to do what? Well, to deliver energy, to produce energy for the body. And that's exactly what other researchers have done, have studied, is that not only can it grab and hold on to energy, it can hold on to it and deliver it to other areas of the body where energy is needed. It's constantly moving. The structure, as organized as it is, it's constantly moving, shedding off, building a greater exclusion zone. The more hydrophilic the surface is, the deeper the exclusion zone. But it becomes this pure state where energy in and of itself is intended to be held and used. Fascinating because of what can happen with that energy. Just because it exists doesn't mean it has energy. The question then is, how does it get its energy? Think of your whole body, right? Every surface, every subsurface, every cell, every part of the cell has this exclusion zone built on it. Where H2O does exist, we know because 98%, 99% of the body's molecular structure is water. Part of water is this EZ area. The whole body's filled with this high energy potential surface. It just needs energy. It just needs something to provide it the charge, and it's going to hold it. And it's going to deliver it. So the question becomes, well, how do you give this EZ zone, how do you give the charge?
Are you asking me? I have an idea.
Oh, okay. Give me your idea.
I have an idea.
Let's see.
Well, how I saw it is light.
You totally are cheating.
Are we?
You're totally like looking at my notes here.
No, I can't see. I cannot read your handwriting, Kai. But no, I love the tagline that we are solar powered beings.
Yes.
In a way, right?
Yeah.
And when I was learning about light and briefly, right? And I'll definitely leave some of this discussion to you.
Oh no.
But like when the light waves reach the water molecule splits. And like you were saying, and it gives that battery the power, that little jump start, if we're using the analogy of the car.
Yep. That's a great. In fact, you're talking about the splitting of the molecular structure of water. It's interesting because in a very similar way, you want to talk about what plants do, and we do it in a very as well as far as creation of energy, photosynthesis, right in line.
Yes.
That's exactly what's happening. And what is photosynthesis but a creation of energy for a bunch of different activities to be done.
Yep. The Journal of Cell Science has a really good, I don't know if we'll put them in the show notes or something, but it talks about, it made me think of like, wait, are we just all plants?
I love that. Well, you know what? Along that line, light is so powerful. And one of the studies that was done with Pollack and quite a few others who have been very interested in studying water for a long time, their entire career for that matter. They wanted to know, well, what things do help charge this EZ and this water battery throughout the body. Light was one. They came across it in a very unusual way. It was Pollack's assistant, he had an EZ created under a microscope. So he had this hydrophilic surface. He was watching the growth of this exclusion zone, and then the rest of the bulk water, as they call it, that was next to the exclusion zone. He had it under his microscope, and he's looking.
And essentially, that was a container with a surface.
Yes.
Of the hydrophilic material.
Yep.
Watching as the water was, reacting in a way. And then, under the microscope.
Shedding protons to build towards the bulk water, igniting its negative charge. And then he could see under the microscope, as they have evidence of this over and over again, that this exclusion zone, this kind of pure state, grows. Well, it's the end of the day, and he by accident turns off his light, goes home, leaves everything exactly where it is, goes home, has dinner with his family to return tomorrow. Well, he comes back the next morning and he looks under his microscope and he sees that the actual exclusion zone had shrunk in half. Nothing had changed, but he left the room. So, I mean, was it me? Was it, what were the circumstances? Why did it shrink? And so he flips on the light for his microscope and the lights and obviously everything else in the room. And as he's watching it, he sees it grow back within minutes to where it was the night before. So then obviously that spawned, okay, we need to do some research, some studies on this, and then they began. And the conclusion of the different studies that have not only introduced the theory, proved the theory, but then it's been tried by peers, was that ultraviolet light all the way up to infrared light, all of it will actually charge the battery. Exposure to all of it. So solar beings, yes. Solar powered, yes.
Absolutely.
All of it. Because it is that light actually from the sun that passes on the energy required and held in the exclusion zone. Held for a long time for that matter. Now, the other question was does ultraviolet light, is there a type of light that is more efficient at providing energy to the body, the exclusion zone in particular? The answer is yes. Infrared light was the strongest by far compared to ultraviolet. When you look at the spectrum, that's the spectrum that you're looking at. Well, although at Solux, we don't have an infrared light at the moment.
We do have something with long wavelengths.
We do have, that sits right next to infrared, and that is our red light. We have our 660 band and our illuminator. A lot of people have had wonderful experiences so far with these red light devices. And let me tell you just one quick story on that. One of the persons that works here in the office, her son had his tonsils taken out. And she had a 660 band. And so she loaned it to him and said, look, I want you to put that on that area of your neck in order to have the red light influence what's going on. And like most surgeries, they said, hey, by day 3, you are going to hate your surgeon, right? You're going to be miserable. You're going to wish this never happened and get through it. Well, day 2 came and gone. Day 3 has come and gone. Day 4 has now passed. And he's yet to experience a traumatic impact from the surgery itself. He has consistently been using red light in the area of where the surgery was. And she asked me, she goes, do you think that could have an impact? And I said, absolutely. I mean, we know that red light helps inflammation, but the question is how? Well, when we learn about the exclusion zone, we know exactly how. It's because the red light is actually providing energy.
Charging that battery.
For those cells, charging that battery to give all the resource necessary for it to do what it's supposed to do. And in his case, it is to heal, to deal. I mean, the proper inflammation response is correct, but only to the extent that it is required, because it should be a healing process. We don't want chronic situation of inflammation that causes more problems. But he is having a very positive experience. It looks to be directly attributed to the 660 band, but rather I would say it's more likely because the 660 band is influencing the exclusion zone and that fourth phase of water to hold energy and to deliver energy to the cells that need to do the work to fix the situation. You want to look at the whole picture in this scenario. Without understanding the value of water in his system and what water does naturally in the exclusion zone and creating that battery of energy all over the body, we are completely missing 80% of what's going on here. I'm not discounting the 660 band. Absolutely. In fact, they prove that is a valuable resource towards what's happening. Further proof of actually how that is effective and true is every time deep sea explorers go down and they take a sample of water from the ocean floor, where, by the way, there is no light and there is no oxygen. They're down there and they find new species every time. How is that possible? If even some of the species that they have actually require oxygen and the effects of light. How is it possible? Well, the answer is actually back to this study in and of itself. The earth floor, through the thermal vents, has infrared radiation. Infrared radiation actually reaches the ocean floor. Thus, energy is being produced on hydrophilic surfaces and creating life. Fascinating, because it's so far beyond. This is a discussion of H2O today. No, we're actually talking about so much more as far as power goes and what it can do with the body.
Kai, I want to bring it back to what I have seen as the 3 principles of hydration, right? We just that was excellent, knowing kind of what water can do inside of us as hydrophilic beings. I don't know if that's quite a right way to say it. I've never seen it written that way, and so we all know that, maybe we can call it the first principle, right? Drinking water. Absorption gets to the cellular level to produce energy. Mm-hmm. Eating water.
Yes.
Right? Hydrating greens and fruits. And this is kind of as opposed to those salt-heavy processed foods that seem to be
raw,
everywhere.
Eat something in its raw that's going to give you a lot of water.
Fresh.
That was raw. A book, Quench.
Yes.
They did a great job throughout that book teaching about how to get water into your system.
Yep, through food, and they have a full smoothie plan.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that, they've got great ingredients and recipes for that. And then they said there's a third principle to this. And I won't say this is as groundbreaking as there's a 4th phase of water, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a third principle to hydration, and that's movement. And so that's actually delivering the hydration to all of the parts of the body. Is you need movement, this idea of movement. And one of those water delivery systems in our body is the fascia. Mm-hmm. And from what I gather, this is somewhat of a new discovery in maybe the past 20 years or so, that they've actually been able to see what the fascia is. Because they described that when students would cut open bodies for school and the bodies were dried out, the fascia was dried out and it was just disregarded. Yep. But now it's been seen as they coined the term one of the deepest anatomical mysteries. Now that already piqued my interest there. And so to access this fascia, they say that it is the largest system in your body, in that it covers everything in your body. It covers your muscles, your brain, your tissues. It's almost like a gel water substance with collagen. Mm-hmm. And what it's absolutely just incredible to learn about, because again, going back, it's something that you can further do to influence the hydration in your body. So Dr. Schleip, he runs a research group in Germany, and he wrote the book Fascial Fitness. And he says, he writes that the fascia is also populated with receptors and nerve endings. So why I bring that up is because I feel like the research that I've done maybe over the past year on trying to improve my health and well-being has been, okay, how am I going to prevent chronic disease and chronic illness? And why this is important to me is if the fascia has nerve endings and receptors, and they describe them as spatial receptors, They fire when the tissue stretches
Yeah.
and moves, and your body can register where it's at in space. And so in the Journal of Internal Medicine, and Dr. Attia, on his many amazing publications, studies, books, YouTube videos, he's made himself very accessible.
Yes.
Which is absolutely incredible. These have talked about when you're over 50, and this is the Journal of Internal Medicine, talks about if you're over 50, 1 in 3 individuals dies within 12 months after a hip fracture. And that only gets worse as you age. Dr. Attia's specific was if you're over 65 and you fall and you break your femur, you break your hip, then you have your 12-month mortality rate raises 15 to 30%. How important is that connection with the fascia, keeping it hydrated? Ingesting the water, but then moving that water throughout your fascia to not only, you want to saturate your whole body. You want those reactions with the exclusionary zone and receiving light for energy. But another facet of this is that spatial awareness. So you don't, and maybe this is rather narrow, right? But the numbers boggle my mind. Is 1 in 3 has a chance of dying after you fall after you're 50 years old. So the fascia, it requires hydration to do its job. And one way to do the fascia, they talk about twisting. They call them restorative twists. And so obviously when you do yoga, you do Tai Chi, Qigong, dancing, you can call those charge breaks. So it's not only moving the water, but all those chemical reactions and metabolic functions. You're charging your body.
Yes.
It's another way to charge the body. It's quite interesting. So they brought this term, and this was that from the book Quench. So Dr. Dana Cohen, she coined this term of let's become office athletes. And they say to activate this fascia, to reap all of the benefits of charging your body, of keeping your body aware in spatial awareness, that you need, even if you're going to the gym, even if you're very active, that you still need to supplement throughout the day with what they call micro movements. And so that's basically you going back to those small twists. So one example is, how often nowadays, I mean, I guess if we want to be safe drivers, we still want to, look behind us as we're backing out, even though we have that camera.
Right.
But how often, other than driving, backing out for the first time during the day in the morning, do we actually turn ourselves? And that was more of a self-assessment for me.
Yeah.
And they talk about these twists. You can twist your arms, you can twist your body. And again, Quench has this awesome program for, their micro movements throughout the day, because when we're in an office and so often we find ourselves in these extremely dehydrating environments, whether it's the air conditioning, if you fly planes a lot, you're getting extremely dehydrated, you're getting dried out. And even if we're trying to drink water and we're sitting all day, we're not moving, these micro movements help deliver that hydration. Hydration is just the first step. Drinking the water, eating the water is just the first step, but movement completes that hydration. When you twist, it releases fresh fluids full of oxygen and nutrients. It's anti-inflammatory. You get that buildup of waste in your body, cellular waste. And so I saw a couple cool things about this. Where it's applied. Maybe are there certain regions of the world that of people that move more? Maybe that can influence their longevity. And I came across this the blue zones. So basically, the blue zones. There's 5 places.
Sounds
sad. I know. I actually don't know why it's blue zones. Maybe I missed something in the reading, but they call them blue zones. maybe those listening or watching,
like orange zones or something,
right? Or yellow. Yellow's happy too, right?
Yeah.
Orange, yeah. But essentially, it's 5 places in the world where people live the longest.
Okay.
And Blue Zones has identified 9 commonalities.
Okay.
Now, I won't go through all 9, but the first one that it showed in this reading I did was movement. And so they found in their environment ways to move naturally. Constantly, being reminded or constantly being forced, maybe that's a bit strong of a word, but constantly nudging them into moving. Whether it's, I immediately thought of, okay, when I learned about this, I was like, okay, I'm going to go eat, because I eat on the couch quite a bit.
Yeah.
Just, maybe that's an adult thing. Maybe I'm rebelling against my parents, but I will purposely try to have half of my meal still over on the counter.
So you have to go get it.
So I have to get up and get it when I learn about this, right? It's forcing me to go up because I'm still hungry. And then it came up with Sanford Bennett, the man who turned young at 70.
Okay.
Interesting tagline. But essentially, he, from chronic illness, and this was a little hazy. It didn't go into a lot of the details on what caused him to be bedridden. But in his book that he wrote, Exercising in Bed, he wrote a whole book, and then he wrote his whole workout plan. What he did, essentially, he brought himself back.
So he did this by micro movements.
Obviously
essentially being somewhat of a invalid and having to use small movements to get bigger movements in order to be able to obviously get out of bed and live a more full life.
Yes, and all he did was just laying there and doing his twisting. Did twists, he constricted his muscles and then relaxed them. And he thinks the reason behind his chronic illnesses and why he was bedridden, he just was so broken down from a long career of probably heavy work. I mean, he lived in the 1800s.
Yeah.
He thought it was the accumulation of waste in his tissues. All of that cellular waste that built up over the years, him not doing those, restorative movements. Yeah. And once he started those, his life completely changed.
That's one of the things that I love in the scanner. The body system scan to me is one of the more informative, and it might sometimes come across as seemingly generic.
Yes.
Yet to the micro movement agenda, it is actually much more impactful, kind of like how water is more than we think it is, right? When you do your body system scan and you go then to recommendations, right? When you're looking at what, sometimes those are movements, get out and do yoga, go for a walk, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And sometimes it's around hydration. Sometimes it's around hydration, but then also balancing with the right nutrients, right? Leafy greens or whatever it might be. And that opens up the great suggestive. Those aren't just, hey, here's just a nice thing to say to you, right? What we're looking at, and in fact, when you look at that, it really is powerful. It's Occam's razor. It's the most simple solutions are usually the right solutions. Drink enough water, get up and move around, eat like vegetables, right? Yeah. These aren't rocket science sort of things. But it's when we step away from those that we actually walk into danger.
Yes.
I mean, even if back on the exclusion zone, it can actually be destroyed. It can deconstruct itself. It's found to deconstruct itself when there is no more energy available to hold it together.
Turning that light off.
Turning the light off, right?
Researcher, yeah.
When you've stopped doing the things that you're learning about in your scanner or the things you already know about that are good, when you stop doing those, you're actually going to put your body in a state where, you think illness has to come along because it's the only thing left to come along because you aren't giving yourself anything to actually sustain what is a better situation. In fact, the real scary thing is when the exclusion zone starts to break down, if we look back at the effect of water on the body, that breakdown actually releases oxygen, single oxygen atoms. Those free roaming oxygen atoms actually can create oxidation. That is the process of the reactive oxygen species, or what is known as a problem-causing structure for the body, whether it's disease, whether it's inflammation, whatever it might be. If you don't bring light in, if you don't bring water in, if you don't pay attention to the activities that the body systems inviting you to do, then you might be missing an opportunity to maintain a state or improve a state that you're learning about from the scanner.
Yeah.
And it's right there. It's not rocket science. This isn't new stuff, although some of this stuff may be new to a lot of us who, when we came across as far as the intricacy of it. But we do understand that we need light. We do understand that we need water. We do understand that we need to move. And all of those things, like Lauren said to you in the very beginning, the consistency, I think, of those will allow the scanner to be clearer in its education for you. And I believe that over time you'll see an impact on your well-being because of it. If everything is going to be tied, if everything as far as health goes is going to be tied to your hydration levels in the tissue, great place to start. So what do you, drink enough water, what, 10?
Oh, yeah. Was it
the first
10 hours, 8 ounces,
8 ounces
per
a day.
hour?
Yeah. Get your 660 band on, right? Expose yourself to some sunlight along the way. And then get up and force yourself to move.
Yep.
Right? Do some activities every day throughout the day. And that's a formula for actually a much better state.
Yeah.
Right?
Just those 3 simple things. And it goes back to you knowing what you're doing for your body and keeping that consistent. And I just keep thinking, well, I'm going to move a little bit. I'm going to drink. I'm going to eat more. And then knowing that, oh, this exclusionary zone can be created through light, I'm going to go outside and do a walk.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, get outside, get out in the sun. If it's nighttime, get on. So everybody listen, if you're listening to this right now, it's after this ends, go for a walk. Go move around. Go take a bottle of water on your walk.
Yes.
You know, if you're driving in the car, when you park the car in the parking lot, park far away from the building and walk to the building, right?
Great.
Take the stairs, that sort of thing.
Force yourself into environments that nudge you to move.
Yeah, it's so simple, and it seems so obvious on its face. We all know this, but sometimes we all just need the reminder.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this was a great reminder today.
Thanks for listening to the Solex podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, and the AOScan mobile device is not a medical device and does not diagnose, treat, or cure any disease.